"Can I share this table?" asked the one-legged girl to the single dad, then he answered. The first thing anyone noticed was the silence that followed her question, a silence so heavy it seemed to press against every table in the small roadside cafe. The second thing was the way the single father's hands froze around a chipped white cup of coffee, as if time itself had stopped to see what kind of man he really was. In moments like these, lives quietly change forever, not with explosions or applause, but with a single choice made under flickering lights and tired hearts. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of humanity, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The man sitting at the corner table was named Daniel, though no one in the cafe knew that, and fewer would have guessed how much weight he carried behind his calm expression. He was in his late 30s, with tired eyes that looked older than his face, eyes shaped by years of worry and responsibility rather than age. His jacket was clean but worn thin at the elbows, and his shoes had seen too many winters. He had chosen the corner table not because it was comfortable, but because it allowed him to disappear. Ever since his wife had passed away 3 years earlier, disappearing had become a survival skill. Daniel was a single father to a 6-year-old son named Noah, a boy with endless questions and a laugh that could still crack through Daniel's darkest days. That afternoon, Noah was at school, and Daniel had taken his lunch break early, escaping the noise of the construction site where he worked. His job paid just enough to keep the lights on and food on the table, but never enough to erase the constant fear of something going wrong. A missed paycheck, a medical bill, a broken car, any one of those could tip their fragile balance. The cafe smelled of old coffee and warm bread, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. Outside, rain streaked the windows in uneven lines, blurring the world beyond the glass. Daniel stared into his cup, thinking about Noah's school shoes that were starting to fall apart, about the notice from the landlord tucked into his pocket, about how tired he felt pretending to be strong all the time. That was when he noticed her. She stood near the entrance at first, hesitating, as if gathering courage. She couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 years old. Her hair was neatly braided, though slightly frayed at the ends, and she wore a faded yellow sweater that hung loosely on her thin frame. What drew attention, though, was her leg. One leg was missing from above the knee, replaced by a simple prosthetic that looked old and ill-fitted. She leaned lightly on a pair of crutches, her movements careful but practiced, like someone who had learned long ago how to navigate a world not built for her. The cafe was nearly full, and most tables were occupied by people too absorbed in their own lives to notice her discomfort. Some glanced at her briefly, then looked away. Others pretended not to see her at all. She scanned the room, her eyes stopping on Daniel's empty chair across from him. There was something about him, perhaps the sadness that matched her own, or perhaps the way he wasn't pretending to be busy, that made her choose his table. When she asked if she could share the table, her voice was quiet but steady. It wasn't pity she was asking for, just permission to exist beside someone. Daniel looked up, startled at first, then confused, then something softer. For a brief moment, fear flickered through him. Fear of doing the wrong thing, of saying something awkward, of opening a door to emotions he had kept tightly shut. Life had taught him to be careful, to protect what little stability he had left. But then he saw her eyes. They held no expectation, no demand, just a simple hope that someone would say yes. He nodded. That small gesture, barely noticeable to anyone else, was the first crack in two broken worlds. She moved slowly, settling into the chair with practiced movements, placing her crutches neatly against the table. Daniel noticed the way her hands trembled slightly, not from weakness but from exhaustion. Living with difference, he realized, required constant strength. They sat in silence at first, an awkward but gentle silence, like two strangers standing under the same umbrella in the rain. Daniel returned to his coffee, but his thoughts were no longer trapped in his worries. He found himself wondering where her parents were, whether she was alone by choice or necessity. He wanted to ask, but years of grief had taught him that some questions were better left unspoken until trust was earned. Minutes passed. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the windows. The girl took a small notebook from her bag and began to draw, her pencil moving with quiet focus. Daniel watched from the corner of his eye, noticing the way her face softened as she sketched, as if the world made more sense on paper. Eventually, she slid the notebook slightly, not fully offering it, just enough for him to see. It was a drawing of a man and a child holding hands under a crooked umbrella. One of the figures had a small prosthetic leg, and the other carried a worn backpack. The scene was simple, but it radiated warmth. Something tightened in Daniel's chest. He thought of Noah, of how often he worried about failing him, about not being enough. He thought of his wife, of promises made and broken by fate. And in that moment, sitting across from a one-legged girl in a cafe that smelled of burnt coffee, he felt something unfamiliar but desperately needed. Connection. The girl didn't explain the drawing, and Daniel didn't ask. He simply nodded, acknowledging it, honoring the unspoken story behind it. The waitress came by, glanced at the girl, hesitated, then looked at Daniel. Without making a show of it, Daniel ordered an extra sandwich. He didn't frame it as charity or kindness. It was just lunch, shared at a table where two lives had briefly intersected. As they ate, the silence became comfortable. The girl's name, he would later learn, was Lily. She lived with her mother in a small apartment nearby. Her leg had been lost in an accident years ago, one she didn't remember clearly, but the stares and whispers afterward had etched themselves into her memory. Cafes, buses, playgrounds, all of them were reminders that she was different, that she had to ask for space rather than assume it. Daniel listened as she shared pieces of her world, not with self-pity but with quiet honesty. He didn't interrupt or rush her. He understood what it meant to carry pain without wanting to be defined by it. In her resilience, he saw a reflection of his own struggle to raise Noah alone, to show strength even when he felt hollow inside. When it was time to leave, Daniel felt an unexpected heaviness. He hadn't realized how much he needed this moment, how much it mattered to be seen not as a problem or a burden, but as a person capable of kindness. Lily gathered her things, her movements careful as always. She smiled at him, a small smile, but one that carried more gratitude than words ever could. As she left, the cafe seemed quieter, emptier somehow. Daniel finished his coffee, now cold, and stared at the empty chair across from him. He felt changed, though he couldn't yet explain how. He paid the bill and stepped back into the rain, his thoughts lighter despite the gray sky. Over the following weeks, Daniel found himself returning to that cafe more often. Sometimes Lily was there, sometimes not. When she was, they shared the table again. Sometimes Noah joined them, instantly drawn to Lily's drawings and stories. Watching his son laugh with her, Daniel felt a piece of his heart heal in ways he hadn't known were possible. Lily's mother eventually joined them too, a woman worn down by years of worry but softened by gratitude. Their lives, once parallel lines of quiet struggle, began to intersect more often. They shared meals, small celebrations, and the comfort of knowing they were not alone. Daniel still worked long hours. Bills still came. Life did not magically become easy. But something fundamental had shifted. He no longer felt invisible. He no longer felt like the world was something to endure alone. A simple yes, given on a rainy afternoon, had opened the door to community, to shared strength, to hope. Years later, Daniel would think back to that moment whenever he faced a hard choice. He would remember the weight of that silence, the look in Lily's eyes, and the power of answering with kindness instead of fear. Noah grew up understanding that kindness wasn't loud or heroic, but quiet and consistent. Lily grew into a confident young woman, her drawings turning into paintings that told stories of resilience and grace. And it all began with a table, a question, and a man brave enough to say yes. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you of the power of small acts and shared humanity, please take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps spread stories that matter. Before we end, we have one special request for you. Please comment below and tell us what this story made you feel, or share a moment when a simple act of kindness changed your life. Because sometimes, the smallest answers create the biggest miracles, and sometimes, all it takes to change a life is a shared table and an open heart.